Hello and welcome to another episode of Off Bishop Street, a podcast from the Department of Theological Studies at Concordia University in Montreal. Today we're talking to Dr. Lucian Turcescu. He's a full-time professor at the Department of Theological Studies here at Concordia. We talk a bit about his early life and growing up, his studies abroad as well as in Toronto, his interest in patristics as well as his current and ongoing research in theology in Romania. Please enjoy. Okay, so first, could you just tell us a bit about your background, like your early life and growing up?
So I grew up in communist Romania until I was 23, and then communism collapsed, and the country adopted Western style liberal democracy, or what they were hoping it's gonna be something that would look like Western style. And such much of my training before the collapse of communism in 1989 was completing education. I went on to study computer science for 2 years until 1988, when I decided to try to go to theology. It was a decision that came after I realized that I'm not passionate about computers, and I was more passionate about ancient languages and philosophy. I didn't know what I was going to go into the study of theology at that time. It wasn't even easy. Because given the circumstances, in 1988, the country was communist and religion was discouraged, and people were staying away from the study of theology. So it took me quite a bit of time and courage to make that decision. And in 1988, I began studying theology. I was admitted following an exam. I completed my degree there, and then in 1992 I came to Canada, which led me to starting a doctorate at the University of Toronto, more specifically St. Michael's University College, which is part of the University of Toronto. So I studied theology there for my doctoral work. And this led to my first job, full-time job at St. Francis Xavier University, Nova Scotia. From there, I worked there from 1999 till 2005, and then I joined Concordia in 2005.
Which kind of puts us up to date as far as your workplace.
I mean, I can certainly talk a bit more about details of what I studied and how, and if that's something that you want me to.
Well, first, I'm kind of curious, because you grew up in Romania at the time, it was communist, so faith was, I guess, to say the least, I guess, like a discouraged part of culture, but still, I don't know much about Romania, but I know that its placement geographically puts it kind of in an interesting place. Like, I think maybe it's like kind of equal distance between like Rome and Istanbul. Maybe it's a bit of a crossroads faith-wise. You know, was this a noticeable thing growing up? Like, was there Eastern Orthodox stuff around? Was it like Catholicism, or did you notice anything?
Yeah, it is. Romania is a predominantly Orthodox country. And like in any communist country, the ultimate goal for the communist regimes was to get rid of religion. It was not to create a secular environment like we see here, where religion is pushed out of the public sphere, but it is protected, it is guaranteed. People can practice their religions as long as they do it in private. No, there the ultimate goal was atheism and getting rid of religion. So there were. This was the initial push when communism was introduced in the countries of Eastern Europe after World War II. But soon thereafter, the communist regimes realized that it's better to collaborate with the local churches. And by local, I mean churches that were majority in some of those countries, like the Eastern Orthodox Church in Romania or the Catholic Church in Poland. The communists realized that those churches were very popular with the population, and they couldn't ignore the influence the church had on the population, and possibly could even use that influence. So there was this kind of situation, and when I was growing up as a child and as a high school student, for example, they would discourage us from going to churches, but some people still continued to go. I remember my grandmother used to take me to church. I didn't go much when I was a kid, but I went several times with her. I was baptized, and by the time I was in high school, there were events such as Easter. For example, the authorities would discourage us from going to church on Easter. You know, this celebration that the Eastern Orthodox Church has at Easter with midnight candle circling the church. People with candles, lit candles, are circling the church. So we were discouraged from doing that. They would extend the hours for nightclubs, for young people to go to nightclubs instead of staying
really?
and attending a church service. But trying to go to a church service was seen as an act of defiance, and many young people were doing it. Didn't understand necessarily in a religious sense that kind of attitude, but more like in the sense of opposing the regime, trying to show defiance towards the regime.
Right.
So that was the atmosphere I kind of grew up in. And you could go to Sunday services. At some point, the authorities were not very keen on enforcing this in the 80s, in particular, when they had to deal with other issues like economic issues, major crises, economic crisis. So they didn't have the time to monitor everybody very strictly.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So how? So you're growing up maybe in your own home in like a moderately religious context, or you're at least with some family members you're observing at least significant holy days and stuff. So how does it happen that a kid in Romania who's seemingly got a career path like going at computer science and stuff, how does this switch happen into theology, or like what was the spark that sort of got your interest there?
There was a popular philosopher at the time, and in living in Romania, and some of his disciples published a book, a volume of correspondence between him and them. And that was a very influential book with my generation. And there, this guy was talking about, if you really want to understand serious philosophy, I don't know, Plato, Aristotle, and others, you have to learn the languages. So this thing it kind of appealed to me. I said, wow, this is really interesting. And how about if I start learning languages, some of these ancient languages? So I started learning Greek by myself, ancient Greek. And then when I was in computer science, I sought some tutoring from a teacher who could teach me Greek. So I guess that liking philosophy and testing a bit with ancient languages is what opened up the gate for me for possibly exploring theology. Theology was not banned in Romania. there were people who wanted to become priests, and they would go to study theology. So from there, at some point, I was considering doing philosophy, but then upon reflecting more and upon meeting some monks that I spoke to, I decided to go with theology. And you had to prepare for entrance exams at the time, so it was it took about a year for me to prepare, and in 1988 I was successful in being admitted to a faculty of theology.
And okay, and around this time, I think in 1989, right, with the collapse of the Soviet Empire, Romania had its own revolution. So you're a university student at this time. What was the general reaction among the university students, or I guess the general population?
It was we were told as students at different times that were probably disorders would come from the secret police, and they were transmitted by the administration of the theological institute that I was a part of. There were various times when they perceived as difficult times with people protesting more or less silently. So we were told as theologists, don't go out, don't talk about Christianity, don't go in the city, don't go to a restaurant or something, because if they see that you're a theology student, then they might ask you questions and stuff. There was a certain atmosphere of fear, and some of our professors from theology were mentioning this to us. Some of them themselves were collaborators of the regime, and on the one hand they would inform on us, on the other hand they would convey orders that would come from the regime to us about stay put, don't do this, don't do that, to make the situation.
That's wild.
It is, yeah.
It's like a movie or something.
Yeah, so by the time the revolution in Romania happened, very few people believed it would happen. It was a bloody revolution. About 1,000 people were killed during this period of about 6 days of revolts that had begun in parts of the country. And as students of theology, we continued with the semester until about 15th of December, something like that, I remember. And the revolution had already started at that point. The regime was still in control of the situation for a few days, but then it lost control. And I remember going on vacation for Christmas vacation. And it was pretty difficult to travel. It was right on the 22nd of December when the regime collapsed and the dictator fled. And there were all kinds of rumors, like about they're going to stop the train and they're going to shoot everybody who's on the train. Don't drink water because the fountains have been poisoned, and if you're going to drink any water, you might end up dying. So all kinds of rumors that turned out not to be true. But in various cities there were, including in the city of Sibiu in Transylvania, where I was studying, the fight had begun. It was between the communist secret police and the army, because the army at some point switched sides and they declared themselves on the side of the population, and that's when they were attacked by the secret police, who were still trying to so I don't want to sound like I was any revolutionary of sorts, but as I was going to the train station, a few bullets flew by me. And I didn't realize how serious that was, and I didn't realize that I could have ended up with a bullet in my head or something. I was lucky. I was lucky.
Yeah, but I mean, no matter what, I mean, to live through something like that is, that's wild. I mean, that's something that people rarely have to face in life, at least in modern life.
It is. It's a very weird sentiment, yeah.
And I'm curious, like, not to get too much on tangent, but we're allowed, so it's fine. But like, I do know that you do work sometimes as expert witness on like human rights cases and immigration
Yeah,
cases, especially when a Romanian representative is needed. Like,
yeah.
do you think that that sort of work was influenced by like some of the things that you lived through during this revolution? Like,
I think so. I think so. And I usually tend to deal with cases that involve human rights abuses in the areas of religion or ethnicity,
okay,
where I could provide a bit of expertise. Yeah.
okay,
One of my areas of scholarship is religion and politics. So I'm teaching, I'm doing research in that area. I've published in that area. So sometimes I get called by this or that lawyer to provide a bit of help,
hmm, okay.
especially people whose religious freedom is limited or they experienced trauma in connection with their religious beliefs. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I can definitely see, the connection between there, even though the, say, Romanian Revolution wasn't necessarily about religion, but I mean, of course, it is all about human rights in the
Well,
end.
it's interesting that you mentioned that because I was reading an article recently that tried to make the case that during the revolution, some people, quite a few people, claimed. I mean, they claimed afterwards that
Hmm.
they were motivated by a religious desire to
Mm.
fight for the truth and to fight for putting God back into their own life and into the public sphere. So it's still an area that's not studied, like the connection between revolution and religion, but some people are starting to make that case.
Well, yeah, I mean, you even mentioned the idea, like, it was almost like a countercultural thing for the youth to seek religion or go
Yes,
to church because it
yeah,
was, make it not allowed, and like young people will do it even if that thing is just going to church.
yeah,
But
and interestingly enough, this has led to a rise in religious belief and practice after 1989. But it's interesting, in some countries, this growth in religiosity has continued uh,
mhm.
to this day, while in others it was like a bubble that lasted for a few years and then it went down. And one case in point with the bubble is Russia, because a
Yeah.
lot of people think Russia is very religious, and it was very religious right after 1991 when communism collapsed in the former Soviet Union. But
Mhm.
then it went down, and during some periods it was very, very. It turned out that the work of an atheistic regime for 70 years, it lasted for 70 years in Russia,
Yeah.
made a huge dent in religious belief.
Hmm. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Like, and I even like recently I read, finally got around to reading, I can't remember the exact title, but like The Pilgrim's Way, and the
Yeah,
pilgrim continues his
yeah,
way or
yeah,
whatever. And to sort of, that gives you maybe a little like semi-fictional, sort of historical fictional, but not, I don't know, it's based on real thing, I don't know. But like, look at that area, Ukraine and Russia, during just in like the 50 years before communism sort of took over the country.
yeah.
And it's like, you get the impression it was like a very, very pious place, a very
Yeah, it was
filled.
a curious religiosity. Sometimes there was a lot of superstition.
Mm,
Sometimes it was right at the beginning of the 20th century. There was a lot of violence coming from religious
mhm.
students. Sometimes, so it was a curious mix of very deep religion with superstition with fundamentalism. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so you eventually do leave Romania to
yeah,
continue studies in Canada, at St. Michael's, which is part of University of Toronto. Which St. Michael's is it's not the Jesuit branch. It would be the.
the Basilian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
So
they have the Basilian order, and the Faculty of Theology belongs to the Basilian order, which is a Catholic order. Yeah,
okay. Um, so for your graduate work, what sort of stuff were you at that point looking at? Like, because I think you had transitioned a bit from, you're not necessarily looking at languages and stuff. It's more maybe patristics and things like
Yeah,
that,
well,
or.
exactly. Like I was. This is an amazing place to study theology, the Toronto School of Theology, which has this 7 colleges that have um, put resources together in terms of teaching, in terms of libraries and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
faculty and students. And it was there was this possibility to take courses at any of the colleges. You had to take 12 courses during your doctoral years for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and then write a comprehensive exam and continue on with the doctorate. So I took a variety of courses, but eventually I settled on this topic, which was intriguing me from my studies in Romania with personhood, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a topic that was quite hot in the 90s. A lot of people were interested in this idea of personhood, and
Mm-hmm.
I was interested in when exactly does this concept appear. And during my studies, I kind of came to the conclusion, and then I delved into it more deeply, that it originated with the 4th century, when Christian theologians were trying to justify and to explain why do they believe in this one God in 3 persons.
Mm-hmm.
So there has been this need to explain, like, what exactly are those 3 persons. And um, I undertook in my doctorate, and then the doctoral thesis was published as a book by Oxford University Press in 2005, to look at the concept of persons in Gregory of Nyssa, of divine persons.
Mm-hmm.
And Gregory of Nyssa is one of the 3 Cappadocian fathers from the 4th century, with his brother Basil and their friend, the other Gregory of Nazianzus.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the more philosophical among the 3 of them, and I found studying him to be a really rewarding task for me. And I think I was lucky to have 2 amazing supervisors, one philosopher who is still teaching in his
Mm-hmm.
advanced age. I hear that he's teaching at the Catholic University in Washington, D.C.
Oh yeah.
A major philosopher, John Rist,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was a professor from St. Michael's, who was specializing in Basil of Caesarea and the Cappadocian Father. So I got help from someone who was specializing in my um, the 3 theologians I was interested in, and from a
Mm-hmm.
philosopher. So that was a very helpful combination. I'm really proud of having worked with these 2 um, giants, and
Yeah.
to um, to be supervised by them. So yeah, and
Oh,
the topic of person, I think
I
I
think I
think
lost you a
I
little bit. Are you still there?
yes, yeah, I'm here.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know.
Okay. Just lost the last part, but you're just saying that yeah, you felt lucky to be able to work with such like notable figures in the theological philosophical world on that subject. I think.
Yes, yeah. So do you want me to repeat that
No, I
after
got
that?
that part. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of the subject, it was this concept of personhood and how it appears, and I was able to establish that while there were some rudiments of a concept of individual before the 4th century, these rudiments cannot um, serve as a concept of person before the 4th century, before this Christian development of the teachings about the Trinity, the Christian
Mm-hmm.
Trinity. So it is
Mm-hmm.
in this process that a clarification, and there's a lot of discussion about terminological discussion, and about the meanings of those terms and about the theology behind. And I think I am convinced, and I managed to convince my supervisors and my defense committee that this was the case, that the concept of person did not exist in the West until the 4th century.
Was that because it's just because it's almost like not an accident, but it's like they came up with an idea of personhood because they had to distinguish these three persons. So in the process,
Yeah.
they then distinguish what a human person is, say, or you know what I mean?
Yes, they use the analogy of a human person, but there was no notion of human person
Right.
even at the time. So you were using an analogy that was still in its infancy, and I think there was talk of individuals, and there was talk of the soul, and there was talk about identity in like part of us is identity and how we identify ourselves before, but nobody put them together, all those concepts, like this 4th century theologians did, to come up with something new, to come up with something that would form the basis of our modern concepts of person. Like nowadays, when you talk about person, usually a lot of people um, understand person as a center of consciousness in line with René Descartes, in line with John Locke. So we're talking about modernity, and a person is defined as a center of consciousness. You're a person as long as you have consciousness. Once you lose your consciousness due to an accident, you kind of lose your memories and everything. You don't know who exactly you are anymore. Or once you lose your consciousness, you're no longer considered a person. And that's why we have these debates going on about the beginnings and ends of life, when normally a person has rights and is protected. But what do you do with a fetus who's not yet born? Is that a person? What do you do with a person who has lost the moral compass and has committed some heinous crimes? Can that be executed? Is it still a person? Like in the United States is still practicing the capital punishment, and that's justified using the concept of person. So there are these debates, but they didn't have this. They didn't understand a person as a center of consciousness in antiquity. This is a modern development. They understood it differently, and it's in a way a more humane way of understanding a person, especially the part about relation. A person is understood as someone who's in relation with someone else, with another person.
Yeah.
And that brings a dimension of more humanity, and how do you treat someone who, although he or she lost the consciousness, they're still able um, to survive. I mean, sometimes we keep these human beings, we keep them on life support. What are you gonna do? Are you gonna just get rid of them because they're not persons anymore, or are you continue to provide some support? And that's a big dilemma. That the modern concept of person, when you say it's just consciousness, center of consciousness, it allows you to act quickly. It allows you to act under economic imperatives and say, okay, I can disconnect this human being from the devices, from the life support.
It's like it's practical, you know.
It's
We
practical.
have an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Like our life is dominated by these practical decisions, by what the medical establishment is telling us, by what the insurance companies are telling us.
Yeah. It sounds like you're leaning towards saying, and so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, are there things, you know? Of course, the study of like patristics and have a lot of historical significance, but would you say it has a new or at least still vibrant significance? Like, should we be looking at these things when we're thinking about ideas of personhood, even in our modern times or contemporary times?
Well, it has been appealing to people, especially in the 90s, and there were people who were trying to use these ancient insights and bring them to bear on our modern life, contemporary
Hmm.
life. But the thing is, even coming from Eastern Europe, I can connect with that. Here, we saw, especially as researchers, that, for example, uh, we didn't have much time to talk about communism because the interest of the world shifted to something else. The Western world after 1990, there was some interest in communism and what happened for about um, 5 to 10 years, and then other concerns started taking over, like terrorism, for example. 9/11 came. Um, Globalization is another. So you see, sometimes you see research funding being shifted in other directions. Like nowadays, for example, we have this virus, and there is a lot of various agencies have made research money available for the study of this COVID virus. Okay,
Hmm.
fine, but who exactly is a specialist in COVID? Can you talk about COVID from, okay, from a medical perspective, I understand, but from a sociological perspective, from a
Hmm.
political science
Hmm.
perspective,
Hmm.
or theological perspective. So it's in a way various political events, various social events are dictating where the research money is being oriented, and sometimes you don't have time to necessarily dig into a subject because another subject becomes important, and this the paradigm shifts. So in a way, this concept of person probably should be revisited, and given a chance, especially when there's all this talk about identity and about identity of minority groups and all
Hmm.
kinds of identities. I think some of these ancient insights could help
Yeah.
with our modern searches for identity, which is, I mean, it's a very important search.
Or even like, again, this is everything's kind of been brushed under the rug lately, but like even sexual politics,
Yeah,
at least for the last few years been hot button topic with Jordan Peterson's ideas of like forced nomenclature and stuff
yeah,
like that. We have this in Canada right now, like,
yeah.
University of Toronto, one of the top professors, saying that, it's a political issue, and other people are saying it's like you're saying, like an issue of personhood.
Yeah, and about the identity, which is
Yeah.
what a lot of people are very interested in understanding their own identity or identities. And
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Just on the topic in general, though, of patristics, like I'm just kind of curious. Of course, this is what you did in your PhD, and you teach courses related to the subject. But what in general kind of draws you to continue looking at these figures? Because and you're looking at other things in personhood for sure. But what is it about this time? I guess what, fourth century to
hmm,
ninth century, maybe, or something around that. But like, what
yeah.
draws you back to these now ancient thinkers?
I think the fourth century is a century when it's like, because of the legalization of Christianity, and people don't have to deal with persecutions anymore, and they can concentrate on other issues, including philosophical, theological issues, but also practical issues. Like a lot of people want to take up a new way of life, and they're not happy with the fact that, okay, now everybody is becoming a Christian because, it's convenient to become a Christian. So
Mm-hmm.
they decide to go out of the world and become monks and nuns. And so it's a very interesting century. It's a very complex century.
Mm-hmm.
We used to joke in my doctoral years with colleagues, like, which 2 weeks in the 4th century do you specialize in?
Right. Yeah.
Because it is so complex, and don't claim to even understand even like 1 year or 2 years from that century, because it's that so many things have happened. So
Yeah.
in a way, it was fascinating for me. It kind of combined my interests with between philosophy and theology.
Mm-hmm.
But sadly, I have to confess that my research hasn't been in this area for many years, um, because I started developing an interest in religion and politics in Eastern Europe in particular, and that's where my research after 2008, my research has shifted almost exclusively in that area. I'm still teaching patristics. I teach it
Mm-hmm.
for graduate students. I teach an intro to early Christianity for undergrad students,
Mm-hmm.
but the research has been in a new area.
So this shift, of course, I guess it has, there's personal reasons for this shift. Like I guess politics and religion is something that in Eastern Europe is something that's like has affected you
Yeah.
to a degree, but certainly affected your home country and stuff. It was that the sort of motivation behind that,
This
like the
was
interest.
partly, yes, partly that was the motivation. And partly the motivation was that patristic studies of the type that I was making were not really supported by research grants. Uh,
Right.
if you worked in patristics and you studied manuscripts, yes, you had good chances of getting a research grant. But if I
Mm-hmm.
never worked on manuscripts, and as a result, some of my attempts to get some funding were unsuccessful, and I said, okay, I'm gonna refocus and do so convincingly, like publishing, and then try again my luck at research grants, which I was fortunate enough to be able to get them for the new subject.
Yeah. Well, and maybe this we can tie sort of the last question I have with you with your current research interest. It would be to say, what's the continuing motivation for you to keep working and researching in this field, particularly in this research of religion and politics in Eastern Europe?
Well, there have been numerous changes happening in that part of the world. One of the topics that I was very interested in is what kind of models of church-state relations people there are interested in, and you have a variety of models ranging from strict separation between churches and state, and to a model that embraces very close connections between church and state, and everything else in between, including pluralism. And in a way, personally, I'm very passionate about the pluralistic model, because in many, I don't know if most countries of the world, we deal with religious pluralism. So we cannot claim that, okay, there is only one majority religion and we pretend that others do not exist. Even if they are minorities, it's important for them to have rights. It's important for the countries, especially the ones that consider themselves democratic, to give rights to religious groups. And thus I'm interested, this is one area. Another area that I'm interested in is that of collaboration and resistance to communism. So my current project that is finishing now is looking at how religious groups in Romania collaborated or opposed communism. And that's
Okay.
that's another, yeah, my current interests are in these
That's
two areas.
an interesting, like, self-reflective almost. It's like the sort of like nameless faces that you're writing about. At the time, you were one of them. Like.
Yeah, well, I don't consider myself a dissident or anything, but there are many cases of of people who opposed communism and people who collaborated and facilitated the spread of communism, although they were religious.